What's up, everyone? Welcome back to a History of Basketball in 15 Sneakers podcast from Grind City Media. We are coming to you live from the Built for Tough studio here in Memphis. I'm Lang Whitaker. I'm with my guy, Russ Bankston. Russ is the author of A History of Basketball in 15 Sneakers, the new book out now as you read this. And we are working our way through this book, talking about sneakers, talking about basketball. For our purposes, we're on chapter 10, episode 10 of this podcast. And we come to a shoe, the Nike Air Swoops. I hold this up here so you can see it because we don't have this shoe and it's almost impossible to find.
It's super impossible. I thought initially oh yeah, I'll be able to find a pair of these on eBay or something, and they just don't pop up.
I looked also because I was like, oh, maybe I'll just order us a pair to use here. And I looked on the secondary, the StockX and all those things and could not find a pair of these shoes.
Yeah, I mean, I thought we might need a pair to shoot for the book even. And I was like, oh, yeah, I should search for that. And it's like, uh-oh.
So why this shoe, Russ? Why did the Nike Air Swoops make the 15?
Well, I will make a confession that initially I did not have the Swoops in the 15. And I was leaving my storage unit one day and I had this collapse into the car moment where I'm like, oh my God, I didn't include a women's shoe. And it's not that inclusivity was really the
reason
this pressing thing for me, but I realized this is a story I do want to tell and this is something I should have in there.
Yeah.
And the initial thought was to talk about the Swoop Zoom, which I think we might have a photo of in there, but it's this later shoe of hers that had sort of teeth up the side. And I distinctly remember going to the Nike employee store and trying a pair on.
Yeah.
And
what year
they were
would this
so
have been?
cool. This would have been
late
97.
90s? Yeah.
They came pretty quickly. And actually Aaron Cooper, who worked on that shoe, told me a story later which would explain why I didn't buy them.
Yeah.
Is that there's an inner booty in that shoe. And the initial design had this stretch material. Mm-hmm. And for either cost reasons or something, they did a non-stretchable material. So they didn't quite fit right. And I think built on a women's last, that shoe was a bit narrow.
Yeah.
So that was part of the reason I probably didn't buy it. But that kind of goes to why this shoe is so hard to find. None of this stuff has been brought back. They brought back one of the later, I think it was the Swoopes 2.
Yeah. They
did bring back. But, the Swoopes 1, and the reason I ended up talking about this shoe and making this shoe the focus of the chapter was it's kind of cliche to do the first shoe in a line, but this was the first women's signature shoe at a time when hardly anyone had signature shoes to begin with.
And she only really wore this shoe playing for USA Basketball, right? Oh, I mean, I guess at the WNBA the first season.
No, it was just
by then they
USA
had the second
Basketball,
one. Yeah.
and it was pretty much only that tour they did playing college teams and other international teams.
I didn't remember this part. I mean, I remember Cheryl Swoopes playing, before her, I remember Cheryl Miller, and, I grew up in Atlanta, and University of Georgia always had really good women's basketball teams.
Yeah.
And when I went to University of Georgia, we would go to the student rec center every day after class and play pickup basketball. And I played high school basketball. I was okay, but I wasn't as good as the guys who played for the Georgia team. And they would have a court where they would play usually. But we would usually play with the women's players from the team.
Yeah.
And I got to play against Teresa Edwards and some of these, Lakeisha Frett, who ended up on the New York Liberty in WNBA.
Okay.
And we would play against them, and they would destroy us. They were so good at basketball. Good. But at the time, there was no domestic place for them to play after college.
Right.
And, Cheryl Swoopes played 2 years at Texas Tech, right? And gets done with college, and what's next? And she ends up playing, and I don't remember this U.S. women's barnstorming team, basically.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. I remember one of my early stories for Slam, I went to Christ the King to do a story on them. And I ended up playing, I don't remember if it wasn't one-on-one, but it was some kind of shooting thing with a girl from one of the Christ the King teams. And I got lit up, you know, and I was 24, 25 at that point. Yeah. I'm not saying I was good, but Yeah, I mean, I got smoked.
Our excuse was always like, well, they're scholarship athletes. We don't want to hurt them. We don't want anybody to get injured.
King had a really good team. I don't know if Shamiqua was there at the time.
Yeah.
That might have even been before Shamiqua was there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and I think like to our credit, when we were at Slam, like we put Shamiqua on the cover in a Knicks uniform, which apparently made Pat Summitt mad. I apologize to Pat wherever you are. Which had like Holtzclaw on the back. Like we could have just gotten a 23 jersey, but you know, and even going through some of this, I didn't realize how late it was. You know, like Title IX was obviously hugely important for getting more women to play sports, but like Olympic basketball didn't become a medal sport for women until I believe it was 76. I would have to refer to my own book for this. You know, for a long time, you had like the split court where like half the team couldn't cross half court. Like women's basketball
was like 3-on-3.
Entirely separate.
Yeah, it was totally different than the way they played men's basketball.
And they didn't want it to be as physical. Like the people who came up with women's basketball wanted it to be like, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Like cooperation, but not like as much competition and not as forceful as men's. Even though even back then in the 1800s, like you had women like diving after the ball. Like the players didn't necessarily want this. So yeah, I mean, you had Cheryl Miller, who for a long time was the greatest player. I love that apocryphal Reggie story where he goes out and has like the game of his life and comes back home to tell his parents about it. And that was the day like Cheryl scored like 105.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, how do you ever like compete with that? You know, Lisa Leslie had the 100 points in like, I think in the first half.
Yeah, in the first half of a game. She also, I might be wrong, but I think she was the first to dunk in a college game, Lisa Leslie.
Yeah, And they ended up like, because that team she played on in high school would do that for kind of their best graduating senior, like just run it up.
Yeah.
But she like ran it up way past like anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so that women's team, I think, was sort of the dream team women's equivalent.
Yeah.
You know, you have all these players coming together.
And then like on top of that, Swoopes comes out of college and like I remember the run she had like that the last year she scored like 40 something in the championship game.
Yeah.
And she was just like going crazy all the way through the 2 years she was in college, and you were like, all right, well, like this is crazy. Like this is clearly the best women's college player in the country right now. Like, but then what happens after that?
Right. And it's kind of funny because like I didn't really get into that in the book, and I probably should have because it's a better parallel. Like everyone referred to her sort of as the female Michael Jordan because there really wasn't a way to equivocate it, and everyone has to be compared to a men's player.
Yeah.
But it's like if you look at Cheryl Swoopes like through her college, she was more like the female Larry Bird.
Yeah.
Because it's like Bird went to Indiana and realized like this wasn't for him and then went to Indiana State. And you had sort of the same thing with Cheryl where she went to Texas. It didn't work out. She came home and went to Texas Tech and like just lit everyone up.
Yeah.
You know, and setting all kinds of records. And it's like, yeah, she goes on to play USA basketball. She briefly went to Europe. And as this USA basketball tour went on, and as people came and watched, and as these women destroyed like almost everyone, there were a few close games in there. You know, you had these women's pro leagues starting to coalesce.
Yeah.
And you had these people who were super enthralled with women's basketball trying to do the ABL.
Yeah.
But then David Stern and his cohorts putting the WNBA together, which was something they had thought about for a while.
I forgot. I didn't remember that the USA women's team played 52 games in the year like before the Olympics to get ready. They went 52-0. Then they go to the Olympics. They don't lose a game there. And then the WNBA kind of like uses that as like a leaping off point to start, you know, with all that talent from that team. And by that time though, you know, Cheryl Swoopes wore this shoe throughout that USA, the first Swoopes. She wore it through the USA basketball stuff. And then by the time the WNBA comes along, that shoe's out.
Yep.
And we've never seen it again.
Yeah, we've never seen it again. And by then, like Nike did expand and start to have other women's shoes. You know, her teammate Cynthia Cooper got one. Lisa Leslie eventually gets a shoe. Dawn Staley gets a shoe.
I got a Diana Taurasi signature shoe from when she was in the WNBA, and she was signed with Bill Duffy, and I knew a bunch of his people, and I got a pair of her shoes. But it was basically just like a Vince Carter Shox. It was just a white Shox shoe that had like a DT logo or something like that. You know, it was white and blue, her colors. But like the Swoopes was the first one that was like designed specifically for a woman and women's basketball. And like there was one of the notes in here I remember like they did things like the strap on the back, you could fit a long fingernail through it, and things like that.
Or like so it wouldn't, which is kind of confusing because it's like, why would you want to play with long fingernails?
Yeah.
I don't know. I've played without cutting my fingernails before, and that seems like a bad idea. You're always going to catch a ball in the wrong spot.
You're the guy who's like, you go up against you and you come back with like little cuts all over your hands. Yeah.
Or like just, ow.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I don't think they'd sorted everything out quite yet. Like, it's funny, like, and that kind of goes with the way books work, unfortunately, is like by the time you're done writing it and by the time you're done editing it and then you wait for it to come out, I think like thankfully brands have done more with women's shoes even since I proposed it years ago and since it came out, with the Sabrina Ionescu shoe and, Stewie's up to her second shoe and hopefully that'll keep going since she won MVP again.
Yeah.
Elena Deladon and her, Nike adaptive shoe I forget what that's called right offhand, but that you can unzip it.
I see
without tying it.
The Sabrina one now that has come out, like people are going crazy about that, and like I've seen like lots of guys on Twitter talking about that's the shoe I want to get next and that kind of thing.
Right. And they put it on ID so you can do up different colorways. Obviously Sabrina was close to Kobe, so you have the sort of low cut and the way it looks even. And hopefully this leads to more. I hope Aja Wilson gets a shoe. I hope, God, I mean, there's so many women in the WNBA. Like, it's funny, like Diana Taurasi, I think, got a Shox.
Yeah.
But she was more known for, like, she would get LeBron colorways.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's cool, and I'm glad she got exclusives in that. But, like, of course she should have her own shoe.
Yeah.
And I think there was so much expectation back then where it's like, if you were an elite women's basketball player, you would just get the elite. You would get Jordans, or you would get Barclays or whatever.
Maybe with your initials on it or something,
right? But Swoopes really, Cheryl was really the one where it's like up and coming women's players could get an elite women's shoe, and like built on a women's last. And it was kind of funny that like finding out like Simone Augustus had already outgrown women's sizing by then. By the time the Swoop shoe came out. So, that's a little unfortunate. But now I think they do a better job of it.
I liked your point. You made a point in the book about how Cheryl Swoopes didn't get a signature shoe because of what she did in the WNBA. Like, she got it sort of like MJ, like based on what she had done before you get to the pro level. And then you said she actually won things in her signature shoe. She didn't get a signature shoe because she had won things.
Right, and I feel like some of these later shoes, even though these women are still performing at a super high level, like Elena Deladon didn't get a shoe until she won WNBA MVP.
Yeah.
Stewie didn't get a shoe until she had already won WNBA MVP. And that's where like you have a little bit of, I think people, and it makes sense, like Aja Wilson is so good. Like, she should have her own shoe.
Yeah.
But, like, Sabrina got hers to start her career in, or just around the start of her career. So that's a little more like with Cheryl, Like, and we'll see, like, with women coming up now, like, will other rookies get their own shoe? Cheryl was able to, and obviously the Houston Comets, I mean, that's kind of, unfortunately, a little bit of a theme there where it's like, not only have we not seen the Swoop shoe come back, but like the Houston Comets were allowed to fold. Like Nike recently did, I think, was it an Air Force One or a Dunk that had like the dates of their championships?
Yeah.
And it's like they won the first 4 titles in the WNBA and the team is gone. Like, how do you even let that happen?
Yeah.
It kind of blows my mind that the NBA backing the WNBA still kind of let it work like this league that was just starting out. Like, I feel like if they wanted the Houston Comets to still be around,
they probably could have. I mean, I think I haven't done the research here offhand, but I'd imagine it. The NBA teams still were responsible financially for whatever losses they were incurring.
Right.
But at the NBA,
Right.
I'm sure could have found an extra pile of cash behind the couch to keep one of these things alive.
And not only that, like you look at the salary discrepancies now are still kind of absurd.
Yeah.
And it's like you could probably keep a WNBA team running for the same price as like some two guard you signed who turned out to be terrible.
Yeah.
You know, like how much you could have funded the entire WNBA, and I apologize for calling someone out, but like Chandler Parsons' contract could have funded the WNBA for like a decade.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious now if we'll see people like Angel Reese or, Caitlin Clark, the girls that are in the women that are in college now and are like becoming these superstars in the NCAA tournament and all that stuff. As they come along now, like you mentioned, Breonna Stewart and other people, like, is this going to be like a regular thing now? Like, do you think we see more than 3 people have a signature shoe in the NBA?
I mean, I would hope so. Like, you look at someone like an Angel Reese, who obviously has become like a household name before she even reaches the pros. And I think there was a little bit of that back in the 90s and 2000s when when the WNBA. When the ABL folded and the WNBA became the focus, you did have like Diana get a shocks. You did have Shamika Holtzclaw get a shocks. So like I think they dabbled in that. Yeah. What I'm really curious to see, and like I kind of talk about this a little bit in the and I'm jumping way ahead, but in like the sort of afterword of the book about retro, I would love to see, like, I don't think it's too late. I think if you bring back that first Swoopes now, it would still be, something popular amongst women who were girls when that team was playing. Like, you would want to wear that. I think you would even want to wear that on the court.
Or even like these young players now who didn't see Cheryl Swoopes play, but have heard the stories and watched the video clips of the 96 Olympics and the first 10 years of the WNBA.
Just like you go back and watch the video, you can find it, like, her and Jordan talking like after they played each other one-on-one, like it's just so good, like the back and forth, and like or going back to like, and I did like a little sidebar on the pair of them because they're so like distinctive by themselves and from each other, Lisa Leslie and Dawn Staley, and obviously Dawn is such a big figure now as a coach, and like
she has a shoe flip-flop commercial. Have you ever seen that? There's some like post-workout, like
maybe, I'm not sure,
slides. I don't remember the company name, but there's a Dawn Staley commercial.
But it's like her, like the S5 that Nike did for her, like it wasn't just a good women's basketball shoe, like it was a good shoe. Yeah. Or same with, and I talk about it in the book, like Lisa Leslie, the L9, like it had that like quilted upper because of Chanel bags, and like so many other companies have done takeoffs on that now. Like you have the what do you call it? Don C did the Jordan 2, and that had quilting on it, and it was the same thing, like, oh, luxury, but it's like that was on Lisa Leslie's shoe, and like Lisa Leslie probably had that Chanel bag. It's certainly more authentic with her. Yeah. So I just think like it's interesting to see where women's signature started, and I think it's good that there's still so much room for it to grow. Yeah. I think like, especially because a lot of the men's basketball shoe stuff and men's retro has been done so many times. And it's like, I don't know. I don't work for a brand. I don't really want to work for a brand. I think like, but this is such an untapped market still on so many levels. I think to me, the Stewie shoe is just as cool as the LaMelo.
Yeah. I agree with you, like the untapped sentence, because it look, women's basketball has only gotten bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger since the 90s. Like there's never been like this dip in popularity, and even last year, like we mentioned, the Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark, and LSU has become this dynasty, and it's going to continue growing. And look, sneaker companies follow the money. They find out, they see where they can make a profit, and they're going to go there. So I think we're going to see more of that. But I was glad you wrote this chapter because I didn't remember. I went to the 96 Olympics. I saw this team play.
ACL, shorty.
But I didn't remember the 52 game exhibition schedule and all that stuff that they did. So that was cool to read about. But all right, that takes us through chapter 10 of the podcasts. And coming up, we have chapter 11 and 11 sneakers. You know what that means. So we'll get to that in a second. But that's Russ. I'm Lang. You're listening to the history of basketball, in 15 sneakers, the podcast here on Grind City Media.
If you're looking for even more sneaker culture content, check out the Sneak Fest Show with me, Kelsey Ray Johnson, Sherman, Adam, and Jerry, live every Tuesday at 2 p.m. on Grind City Media YouTube and the brand new Grind City Media app.